Hi, I'm Mike, owner of the In-Groove in Phoenix, Arizona. Today I'm going to talk to you about the latest mobile Fidelity releases. These are the standard 33 RPM and 45 RPM, the non-one-step releases from mobile Fidelity. That is Warren Zevon's Excitable Boy and Bill Withers' Still Bill. So today's actually the first day that I've really had a chance to do kind of some in-depth listening on these two albums. Now, I had the originals to compare it with. I don't have a litany of these records. This is my original Still Bill, which even though I own a record store and I have an immense amount of records coming in, this is the cleanest copy of Still Bill that I've actually had come in the store in 8-9 years. It's a good, strong VG, It's got a little, it's got some boogers on it, some who knows what that is, but this is a very difficult album to find clean. This was a partay album, and people got down to this album frequently. Has two smash hits on it. It has Use Me and his biggest hit, and probably his biggest hit, Lean On Me. Ain't No Sunshine and Lean On Me, I would say in 2023 are his two biggest hits, right? But it still sounds good, so it was still a good copy for me to do a comparison with. So I'm going to talk about those two albums, and then at the end I'm going to talk about kind of a sleeper album that has nothing to do with these, but was absolutely blown away with it when I heard it, and then I'll talk about that at the end. Okay, so I'll start with the Mobile Fidelity Excitable Boy. So the one thing you'll notice with Mobile Fidelity, starting with this particular title, is they've eliminated the generic paper sleeve from Stoughton, which, was a high-end cardboard sleeve. And they've gone to this like soft touch type material. So a really high quality sleeve, but in kind of a soft touch cover now. So that I thought might have been a one-off with the Warren Zevon, but the second title they released since then actually has that soft touch as well. Unlike the one-step box, the Mobile Fidelity one-step boxes, which originally had a soft touch material similar to this that showed fingerprints the minute you touched it that never could be removed. This is the soft touch that you find on their latest one steps, to where they do not kind of show the fingerprints. You'll see I've been kind of handling this quite a bit on this black, and there is no fingerprint. So that is, all in all, a huge improvement, right? Okay, so the first record I listened to was Excitable Boy. I put the original on, and I thought to myself when I listened to it, I'm like, this is a really good sounding record. Now I've got like a mint copy. I got this from a DJ. Beautiful, clean, original. But I thought to myself, this is a good sounding record. I feel like this is going to be hard to one up, and I put it on and it sounds good. And then I put the Mobile Fidelity on and it sounds really good as well. I feel like Mobile Fidelity at this point is mastering records slightly different. I feel like they have a little bit more balance of an EQ that they're doing now. It could be totally me hallucinating this. But I feel gone are the days to where a lot of people would have accused Mobile Fidelity 10, 12 years ago of having a little bit boosted lower end. So I feel like these are a little bit more balanced, and also not cut really hot. Mobile Fidelities of the past, especially some of those early one steps, are cut really hot. That was not the case with this one. From the original to the Mobile Fidelity copy, I only really had to barely adjust my volume to volume match the two. I mean, it was really close between the two. So the Mobile Fidelity had to be turned up a little bit more to get it to the volume levels of the original. I could tell you I preferred the Mobile Fidelity. I preferred the Mobile Fidelity because the detail it has is unbelievable. And that kind of seems to be a trait that I'm seeing with a lot of newer Mobile Fidelity titles. It's not something that's always been the case, but it is the case here. One of the things I listened to that was the most apparent is during Werewolves of London. There's a pretty prominent piano. The difference between the original of this is that piano has a much more natural sound and it has much better decay. When he hits the keys, you can hear that sustain that rings out. You can't hear that in the original. It doesn't have that same effect. But the thing I noticed the most, as I wouldn't call myself a guitar player, but as somebody who once upon a time played the guitar very poorly in the past, one of the things I'm cognizant of is, when you're trying to learn guitar, you listen to a record, right? And you kind of key in on the instrument being played, you're picking up rhythms and how it's played, and you're listening for the guitar. Well, one of the things I immediately noticed is in the Mobile Fidelity copy, right, versus the original, during Excitable Boy, there's that nice rhythmic guitar, and it's extremely easy to follow. Not only the more aggressively played notes, harder played strums, but all the more softer, delicate strums are very noticeable. And if I was, say, trying to learn how to play this song on guitar, which I'm not, but if I was, it'd be very easy to listen to this pressing, this variant, and follow that entire line of playing from the beginning to end. From the highs, the more aggressive strums, to the more light and delicate strums. Complete, front to back, on the song, you can hear it. And it's not just that. When you listen to other instruments on the soundstage, they are very prevalent and clear and concise. I guess that's my elaborate way of telling you that the instruments are there with more clarity. The audiophile jargon of, there's a blanket that's been lifted off of my speaker. But without saying that, the ability to follow along the instruments was unmistakable. Very clear, very concise, but it also still had a very similar vibe to the original. Sometimes that is taken away, like the Mobile Fidelity Thriller. The vibe was totally different. Now, I prefer the MoFi version of it, but the vibe was very different. The vibe on this is very similar, but the music comes off as much clearer and much more detailed. Keep in mind, it is a 45 RPM, but yeah. So that was Excitable Boy. All right, so that was pretty easy to compare the two. Now, when I listened to Still Bill, this was a little bit harder to do. And the reason being is I made a mistake at first. I generally try to match volumes by ear. And I got a dB meter, and every now and then I have to bust that out. But I normally try to match volumes by ear, kind of get within the ballpark, and listen to it. So I did that in the beginning, so I thought, and I'm listening to their two records, and they seemed pretty close. And I noticed, like, the original had more compression, but it had a deeper, it just boogied a little bit more. It had a little bit better bass. It flushed out a little better on the kick drum. The bottom end flushed out a little bit better. And I noticed that immediately. But now when I listened on, I kind of thought to myself, well, I feel like I really prefer the hits on the MoFi, because they had a better detailed, refined sound, and they boogied. But then I preferred kind of the overall sound on the non-hits, and it was a really weird dilemma. And I thought, this is a really weird prediction. I couldn't quite get my finger on how to explain to you guys the difference in the record. It just didn't, I wouldn't say it was sterile, but kind of along those lines. So it was really weird. Well, finally, just to make sure, I pulled my dB meter out and went to volume match based on the dB meter, and I was wildly off. It was really odd because it seemed very similar just listening to it with the ear. And normally listening to it with my ear, I'm very close. But when I busted out my dB meter and I'm going back and forth between the two, I was way off. The Mobile Fidelity needed to be turned up a considerable amount to get to the same dB levels as my original. And that kind of makes a little bit of sense, considering my original is a little bit on the, I wouldn't say whip side, but it's pretty close. But it doesn't have a very hashy sound because it's cut hot. So I had to volume match it quite considerably from where I was initially testing. Okay, so then I started back over. Now that I'm volume matched, I'm okay. I should have maybe did this from the beginning, because all that low end was flushed out with more volume. All of that thick bass, the kick drum, the lower end, the record needed to be turned up a lot. A lot. It wasn't even close to the Excitable Boy, which was close between the original and the MoFi. Still needed to get turned up quite a bit. Now, when you turn it up quite a bit, now the record kind of comes alive. So not only did it have what I thought was missing from it initially, but it had all that detail and that clarity like you'd get on the greatest hits. I'm a huge fan of the Bill Withers greatest hits. I've talked about it on the channel many times. It is one of the greatest Mobile Fidelity records I think they've ever done. It sounds fantastic. It's one of those records that, I've said this many times too, for years I could not play that in the store if I did not have copies in stock. Because if I put it on a Saturday, we had the high fidelity effect. Put it on a Saturday, 10 people in the store, 7 people wanted to buy the record. And they'd get angry when I would tell them, no, that's my copy. You know, normally in a record store, if you hear something, you want to be able to buy it. So I had to stop even playing that record when it wasn't in stock. And luckily, well, it's come back recently. It's not in stock now. But the sound on it is fantastic. So that is captured here on Still Bill. But comparing the two was a little bit trickier. I had to turn it up. Turn it up if you got the original. Turn it up quite a bit more if you don't have a dB meter. Give it a, like what you think would be the same, but then turn it up even more. Then compare, and I think you'll get kind of probably the same conclusion. It is a dynamite sounding record. It really is good. I enjoyed it. And this is one of those records, although it only has the couple of hits on it, Use Me and Lean on Me, this record is fantastic from front to back. You got the hits loaded up on the A side. You got this nice boogie, funky groove all throughout the B side. It is a great record throughout. So I think Mobile Fidelity has really kind of hit it out of the park here lately. It's kind of interesting because they were doing kind of like a killer job for a little while with some stuff like the Miles reissues. Then we had kind of a lull, I think, sonically, to where you had some of those one-steps that were not my favorite. The Muddy Waters, you know, Pearl. There was a couple of them like you'd listen to and you're like, I don't know, $125. I'm not really thinking that we needed this. You know what I mean? Then it was like that for a little while, and then I feel like they hit it out of the park with Thriller, and now they're popping out good ones again. While simultaneously, I might add, reactivating some of those titles in their catalog that I thought were gone. You know, some of the Miles Davis stuff, it's all coming back now. So, yeah, it's like they're kind of on the upswing again as far as what they're putting out sonically. And again, I'll say that I really think, and I haven't confirmed this with them, I really feel, I don't know if they would even tell me if that's the case, but I feel like the mastering choices are getting more refined even so. And that has kind of been something I've noticed since Krieg started mastering vinyl over there. There's been an evolution to their sound. Okay, let me show you guys another record that you should own for many reasons, but I'll go over them all. So this record came out a couple months ago as part of the Rhino Start Your Ear Off Right. Beginning of 2023, they do the Rocktober, which is like a special record store day, a record store exclusive. So you have to buy this from a brick and mortar record store. The Rocktober titles have to be bought from a brick and mortar record store. So your local mom and pop, us, this is the only place you can get this. But this is Billy Cobham Spectrum. Billy Cobham, one of the greatest drummers of all time. He's on maybe my first or second favorite Miles Davis album, A Tribute to Jack Johnson. I really like In a Silent Way too. I like Kinda Blue too. But he's also on Bitches Brew. Played with Miles, played with George Benson. This guy played with everybody. He is a unbelievably talented top 5 drummer. He's up there with Art Blakey, Tony Williams, Billy Cobham. I mean, these are the absolute pinnacle of jazz drummers. He's fantastic. So this one's $21.99, right? It's a gatefold. It comes on clear vinyl, and it's mastered by Kevin Gray. So originally, I listened to it, and I'm like, holy cow, that's fantastic. That just kills the original. You know what I mean? That's not even close. And I talked about it a little bit on the channel. But anyways, I'm watching an interview. Kevin Gray was giving an interview, and I watch a lot of YouTube. forget where it was even at, but he's given this interview and he's talking about this record and how it required a little bit more work and how the tape was, you know, it was cut from the original analog tape, but it was a little bright and it had to be fixed. And it just blew my mind. So this is an all analog, direct from the master tape, every bit of an audiophile title, right? This is an audiophile banger through and through, and it costs $21.99 in 2023, to where certain 7-inch singles on Record Store Day are costing that amount of money. This record is through and through unbelievable. Now, the Start Your Year Off titles don't typically last very long. They're typically like the Rocktober titles. They make them once. Sometimes they go back and remake them if there's a huge demand for it, but for the most part, they're one and done. I highly recommend you buy this record. If you are a jazz fan, you know about this record. This is the one you should own. It's the definitive version. Friday Music did it. Don't buy that. The original Atlantic pressing, not even close to this. This record you should own. And if you could only pay $21.99 just so you could have this version of Stratus, which is the banger on this, it'd be worth every bit of $21.99 just for that as an all analog Kevin Gray single, $21.99. But I've talked about my love for this album many times and how good it is. But man, to get the definitive version as a random Start Your Ear Off Right title from Rhino, who coincidentally does an all analog pressing of this record, and in typical Rhino fashion, F's it all up by not even telling anybody, because like it shouldn't matter. Well, it does matter, because if you're the consumer and somebody puts that this is an all analog production from start to back, that tells you something. It's like, well, they really cared about, they went through the effort to send Kevin the master tape on this. They cared about the way that record's going to sound. Other than, you know, the alternative where you don't put nothing on the record whatsoever, and then you think to yourself as you're flipping the bends, yeah, that's probably just another mediocre reissue, and you don't think anything of it. Like, why the hell do you not advertise it? Why do you not advertise it? I just don't get it. It'd be like, you know, I don't even know the closest analogy, you know. It'd be like going to the restaurant and they had the Wagyu steak in there for the same price as the chuck, and they didn't tell you. Like, they just said, "Do you want steak A or steak B?" And you're like, I go, you know, what's the difference? One's A, one's B, and you just pick the B or the A, and you don't even. It's a weird analogy, right? But you know what I'm saying? They bring you out a piece of Wagyu, and you're thinking to yourself, well, why the hell didn't you tell me that ahead of time? I'd have been all over that. Why would you keep that information to yourself? And that's the case here. What the hell were they thinking? Anyways, this is a great, funky, fusion-y jazz record from one of the all-time greats. I highly recommend you pick this up while it's around. Billy Cobham Spectrum. But that's it. Yeah, guys, check us out online at www.theingroove.com. Until next time.